Nervous system regulation made me worse, and I'm going to tell you why. If you've tried all the nervous system regulation tools and you still feel like I just want my life back, I was there. I struggled for years with chronic anxiety, chronic insomnia, and more recently, chronic pain. And I tried everything. I tried everything that promised to heal my chronic symptoms. And over time, my life just kept getting smaller and smaller. I had nothing that brought me joy, and it really felt like I was losing everything. You have probably heard of or tried every technique I'm going to talk about. You've read these books, you followed the protocols, and you're still exhausted, and nothing seems to be sticking. Or you even feel like you're going backwards and things are getting worse. If these techniques haven't worked for you, there's nothing wrong with you. People that teach nervous system regulation are missing a key point for people who deal with obsessive and anxious tendencies. The first tool I want to talk about is somatic tracking. This is where you're taught to notice your sensations with curiosity, observe them without judgment, and begin to reinterpret them as non-dangerous. The idea is that attending to these sensations without fear teaches the brain that they are actually safe. What I think is common for a lot of people is that by the time you come across somatic tracking, there's a really good chance that you're already sensitized. You're already at the point where you're monitoring these sensations constantly. You never get a break from checking on them, seeing what they're doing, and monitoring how they change. Now, this tool is asking you to do more of that. For me, attention was already a huge problem. So adding more, even in the realm of curious attention, made sensations stickier for me. My nervous system already prioritized focus and attention, not in a helpful way. So I found I was just generally unable to do this. Me being with my sensations and focusing on them and noticing them and describing them in different ways to seem less dangerous to my brain was not working because of the obsessive thought loops that I was already caught in. With PRT or somatic tracking, I've noticed that there still is this sense of needing to do it right and checking if it's working, and that can get you caught in another loop. So if you've noticed that when you've tried to use this tool and you're paying more attention to those symptoms and sensations and they seem to get louder and stickier and cause you to focus even more on them, or you're now tracking whether the tracking is working, this is not a you problem. This is just a capacity problem. With somatic tracking especially, I realized that I had a form of OCD that is considered somatic OCD, which is this hyper focus and obsessiveness on your sensation. So you're constantly looping on how you feel and then having very scary thoughts about it and then feeling terrified and then checking in with your pain. So you're already stuck in this loop. So to look at your sensations and focus on them, I was already doing that 24/7. I couldn't be asked to put any more attention. I needed to remove that attention. So that tool simply did not work for me. The second tool I used was polyvagal and somatic exercises. So I'm talking vagus nerve stimulation, humming, orienting to my room, shifting from sympathetic activation into ventral vagal, the whole polyvagal ladder. But these exercises were very confusing to me. Because if you're familiar with the polyvagal ladder, you know that there is a state called ventral vagal, which is that open and connected state. I was never in that state, ever. I did not know what that connected state even felt like. So when we talk about the ladder, I was stuck on the ladder. I was stuck on the ladder at the part of hyperarousal. And when you look at the ladder, I was told that that was actually me improving because I wasn't in full-blown shutdown. But for me, I was stuck on that ladder, and it didn't matter if I rubbed my earlobes or if I karate chopped my vagus nerve while humming. It was not enough to move the needle even 1%. In fact, I remember doing a distinct 25-minute routine that had me pulling on my scalp and massaging the outside of my nostrils and rubbing my earlobes and pulling on my neck and resetting my vagus nerve by looking up in the corner. I mean, I gave that my all, and it didn't help at all. And I did what I think most of us do, which is I blamed myself. I really wondered, why aren't these tools working for me? What is uniquely broken about me that is making none of this stuff work? And a bigger issue with the somatic exercises and the polyvagal stuff was it was very clear that I was keeping that hyper focus on my state and feeling like I needed to interrupt it using a tool that would change the state of my body, that would help me get into that safe and connected state, that would help me move up that ladder, that would almost help me like force safety. And again, I want to say I didn't have the personality for it, but the truth is I didn't have the capacity for it yet. I was too sensitized. If you don't know whether or not you're sensitized, I have a quiz that you can take and it'll tell you really quick. But you can't use these exercises as a means to fix something that's broken or to escape what you're feeling. Because when you do that, you're signaling to the brain that it is not safe to feel this. It immediately categorizes any feeling of shutdown or freeze or anxiety or hypervigilance as wrong and that we need to keep climbing up that ladder. Which is why my recommendation is that the goal is not to shift your state. It is to allow it fully without needing it to change. When you let it be there without a lot of interaction and engagement with it, your brain learns that it is safe and it will stop tagging it as a threat. The third tool was brain retraining programs. These are very popular in the rewiring world, working on the neuroplasticity aspect and chronic symptoms and chronic illness. What is commonly prescribed in these brain retraining programs are a rigid protocol, hours long of visualizations every single day, interrupting negative thought patterns kind of obsessively, and rewiring through repetition. I did not heal through a brain retraining program or protocol. I let the brain retraining and the brain rewiring handle itself because the brain will do that on its own. I did try it though. And I felt so much pressure around everything that I felt like I needed to do for the day. And you can agree with me or not, but the whole you must do this for an hour a day, every single day for 6 months straight was a lot of pressure on my sensitized nervous system. The structure of it and the rigidness of it made me feel like I was just failing at something. And it also made me feel like if I can't do this perfectly, I will not get better. So there was a lot of judgment when I wasn't doing it perfectly, or when I wasn't doing first thing in the morning, or when all day it was weighing on me and I'm like, I need to go do my visualizations. I need to do my visualizations. Just panicking internally, which you can imagine was not helpful for my system. And again, when it comes to interrupting every single thought, that does not work well for obsessive and anxious people. It is another way to monitor. It is another way to obsess about doing it right. It doesn't work when you're severely sensitized. It is too much on top of everything else. So if you've tried it and it felt like more pressure than support, again, nothing wrong with you. It's capacity, it's timing, and it's sequencing. It's okay if that's just too much for your system now. And the fourth tool was journaling. This is the most standard if you are struggling with chronic pain or chronic symptoms. It's one of the first things I think people come upon. It was one of the first things I came upon, and I did it all. I made my columns, my past stressors, my current stressors, my personality traits, and I would free write for 20 or 30 minutes. And I would dig up all of my trauma, which I don't recommend. I will link a video on why I do not recommend digging up your trauma and why journaling specifically contributes to raising that baseline and stressing out a sensitized system. The idea here, though, is that getting it out releases it, that it releases your overflowing reservoir. So every day I sat down, I dug up all of my fear. I went to the darkest parts of my psyche, or the more mild ones, depended on which list I was choosing from. I looked at all of the things I considered to be wrong with me and my personality, and I focused primarily on what was wrong and what had gone wrong. And it didn't release anything. It actually just kept my obsessive brain focused on the problem and overwhelmed me, because for me personally, looking at my past and looking at my history was a huge roadblock to my healing, because I believed that because of all the trauma I had been through, because of all the pain I had sustained, I was going to need to do more work. I was going to need to dig more. I was going to need to really heal this trauma, clear this trauma, release these emotions. And I was like, oh my gosh, I have 30 years of this. How am I going to ever journal enough to unearth and release 30 years of trauma, of abuse, of neglect, of CPTSD. So for someone already hyper-focused and already someone who lives primarily in their head and trying to intellectualize everything, it just gave me more material to loop on, more reasons to feel hopeless, and more distraction with the problem versus what to do instead. So if you've tried journaling and it makes you feel more activated, more in your head, and more stuck, you're not doing it wrong. It just might not be the time yet. I want to be really clear why I feel like none of these tools worked for me specifically, or people who relate to the type of content that I make. Most of these tools assume that you are not already watching your body and obsessing about your thinking and your feelings 24/7. For people like us, our attention gets stuck. It gets caught in these obsessive loops. And when you are asked to use tools that focus more on your body, more on your emotions, more on your symptoms, it just locks you in further. None of these tools are bad. I use them now. I just finished journaling this morning. If I have a flare-up of any type of symptom or anything that I get anxious about, I'm able to do somatic tracking just fine. It's very helpful for me to notice, but I'm not in this chronically fearful state anymore. I'm not in this obsessive state. I don't watch my body obsessively. I don't have a hypervigilance or a hyperfocus on what my body is doing. I notice unhelpful thinking and I am able to redirect it if needed, but not because I'm in a threat state. I'm in a noticing state. I'm able to observe my thinking without hypervigilance. These tools that I talked about simply require a capacity that a sensitized nervous system doesn't have yet. That's okay. My personal recommendation is 4 to 6 months, no tools. No tools. The tools aren't going anywhere. They're going to be right where you left them once your system settles a little bit, once your fear decreases, once you're not living in that chronic state of fear, focusing on acceptance, focusing on allowing, focusing on living your life and decreasing that fear response before adding any of these tools back in. And when you do add these tools back in, make sure they are things you actually enjoy doing. You don't have to do any of them. Any of the tools I use now, I really feel like they support my life and they support the person that I want to be. I don't use them obsessively. I don't use them to fix anything. I'm able to be such a curious observer now that they support me, and I put them down when I'm done with them. I don't feel guilty for not using them. I don't feel like if I don't set up my day perfectly, I'm going to be like, I don't have a lot of maintenance that I do on this. I'm not constantly trying to keep myself safe. Someone asked me that the other day. They said, now that you're in this space, how do you keep yourself there? I don't spend any time thinking about keeping myself where I'm at now. Because of the order I did this in, I am not a slave to these tools. I do not equate any of my success or my continued peace and capacity to using these tools. At the end of the day, I just believe that sequencing matters way more than anyone is actually aware of. What actually worked for me was not finding the correct tool. It was stopping the tools altogether. I stopped using tools and I started really working the principles that I teach. I stopped tracking what my body was doing. I stopped monitoring. I stopped daily protocols. I stopped checking to see if it was working, getting better, worse, staying the same. I just decided that was none of my business. I let my body do what it needed to do, and I released it from being this lifelong project that I needed to get to the end of. When you don't have capacity yet, and you are sensitized, those tools very quickly become pressure. I needed less focus on my body, not more. And I needed to live my life and let my nervous system figure out how to settle in the background. So if you've tried these tools and they haven't worked, again, it is not a you problem. It's simply a capacity problem. Your system is just not ready yet. And if there are tools that you find yourself forcing yourself to do, you can take a break from them and you can see what happens, because you really might not need more tools. You might need less. And it might not be a no, it might just be a not yet. There may be a time further down the road where you're able to use these tools responsibly versus weapons against yourself. Drop a comment if you've tried any of these tools. Did they work for you? Did they not work for you? Are you sensitized or are you more dysregulated? And I'll see you guys in the next video.